speak about what I'm going to have you do, but just to kind of refresh the idea. Are you recording?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I want you to go out into the world and make some observations. And we're all given that sheet that kind of explains in detail the way to approach it and some possible, even some ideas to kind of get your mind in the game. So hopefully you still have that. It's also on homeroom if you don't. But the idea is to go out and make your own observations about something that might normally just get overlooked in the world, and then you're going to present it, you're going to organize it, and you're going to design it. So it's essentially information design. So does that seem like a pretty clear explanation of... Yeah. Okay. So this presentation is based a lot on the work of Edward Tufte, and he's just like a design guru. I believe he teaches at Yale. I'm pretty sure about that. Is that right?
I don't know.
I think he does. And he's just kind of known internationally as kind of the go-to guy on clarity in design, but also not just clarity, but aesthetic beauty as well. And so I thought this was a great quote of his. To envision information is to work at the intersection of image, word, number, and art. And then kind of goes from there, and you can read the rest of it on your own. But a lot of what we do in this class should help you think about what makes good visual design. Okay, so I've broken this up into several... Wow, the color is really strange on this. Hang on a second, let me just... I think the contrast is too bright. Okay, well, that's a bit better. So there are five or six principles that I want to go over with you to kind of give you some things to think about that make design either good or bad. And so the first one is this idea of combining different spatial perceptions. And so a lot of times we think of design as sort of flat diagrams, like this sort of thing. And this is a guide to the Ise Shrine in Japan, as it says down there. And it's actually a train map, so you can find, you can see where all the stops let you off in this local region. But it's not just a flat design, it's combined with this more dimensional spatial picture of what the geography actually looks like along this route that you would travel. And so it just deepens your understanding of the space. I mean, we've all seen the kind of like the subway maps or the rail guides, but none of them actually ever give you a sense of the landscape of where these rail lines bring you through. And this is an example of how you could, as Tufte says, escape flatland. And so it has sort of like the global and the local merge together, because you can see the different regions at each station, but then you get the whole picture as well. This one also I thought was a fun example. It's just a very simple thing. It's a weather map, or a weather forecast and map from a Japanese newspaper. And again, like the typical weather, you've probably seen these in the Oregonian, but the typical weather articles just have city and temperature and possible like forecast. But they're usually lists, they're usually alphabetical. There's never really a sense of, okay, and this city is near this city, and this city is near this city. And so this diagram gives you forecast, but then you can totally see what part of the island they relate to. So again, you get the information you need, but you can see it in its context. And it's still really simple, but it's just a really elegant way to think about flat space of the page with the dimensional space that you create through this illusion and through the relationships there. So if you want to, you can ask me questions throughout this as well. The second kind of major heading that he deals with in one of his texts, one of his early texts, is called the macro and the micro. So the idea that with a lot of good design, you get a kind of a global, unified picture when you first look at it, but then when you go in, you can see a lot of detail and density of information. So this is an isometric map, which means it's three-dimensional. Isometric just describes the type of angles that are used to make the drawing. And it's not necessarily a perspective drawing, it doesn't look realistic, but it gives you a sense of the space of the city. And also, you probably notice this when you look on maps of any city, they might have landmarks noted, but you don't know necessarily how tall they are. And something like this gives you a sense of, you know, how to navigate the streets, but then what the actual terrain really looks like. And so you just get a fuller picture of the space that you might navigate. And
Google Map has that. Like if
oh, really?
Like if you're like looking out at Portland, it's like a grid, but then if you zoom in like really close, like that close on a Google Map, it's like it actually shows like the towers.
The three-dimensional. Yeah, that's cool.
Different than that.
This design is also, I think, a great example of the macro and the micro. So you get the macro of just that impact of the poster with those unified hands, and then you get the micro of looking in and seeing all of the figures and hands kind of in unison. So it's just, you know, you see the parts and the whole together, and they operate symbiotically to create a really profound impact. And I think the quote is something like, I have it written down, from collaboration comes one great plan. Sounds like a typical Soviet slogan. Another really great example of the macro and the micro is the Vietnam War Memorial. I don't know if any of you have been to Washington, D.C. and seen this, but there are 58,000 names of people killed in the Vietnam conflict or war, depending on what your textbook says. And so, I mean, the piece itself just has it's just got a really strong, unified impact. It's this glossy granite surface that reflects the surrounding architecture and the surrounding environment. It's totally merged with the land. I mean, this gentle slope down, you know, it just really, I mean, if it was just a horizontal slab of granite sitting on top of the land, it wouldn't have that same kind of locked in feeling of, you know, you enter up here and you gradually walk down the slope. And so you've got that sort of the macro view where it's just this thing that hits you with its impact. But then, of course, there are 58,000 names, and so that would be the micro aspect where you can go in and actually, you know, find names of perhaps people that you were related to or knew.
There's pictures of people engraved in it as well. It's pretty cool. I saw that. We went there for a class trip in high school.
Oh, cool. Well, the interesting thing about this, too, is that the names are etched on there not in alphabetical order, but in the order in which they were killed. And if you think about that, it makes a lot of sense, because consider how many people had the last name Smith. So say your uncle or father or whoever was killed in the Vietnam War and you want to see his name, you've got to sift through all these Smiths to find him. And so doing it in chronological order kind of maintains the integrity of the person, because they're not just sorted into this list with all these other people that potentially have the same last name. So, and I guess there's a little guidebook you can get that helps you find, you know, if you're not sure of the date. But it's a really brilliant, ingenious design. It was actually rejected, I believe. I think Maya Lin went to Yale as well, and this may have been a project that came out of that school, and I know